Okay, so now let's get into the second question. Now, which of the following is not true based on the information provided in the passage? Now, I will going to rate this question as an easy question. Okay, it's not something which is really tricky. Okay, it is the direct question from which the information of which you need to actually find from the passage. Okay, but you need to read the question carefully, which is saying which of the following is not true. Okay, so not true. So all the things are true, but there is something which is not true. So that is your answer. Okay, now the squandrels are incidental traits that appeared as a result of adaptation. Sorry, not the squandrel, where I'm lost. I don't know. Okay, so the spandrels are incidental traits that appeared as a result of adaptation. Okay, now this is correct. Okay, this is correct as per, let's say, the fourth passage. It is saying, okay, an evolutionary spandrel is a physical structure or behavioral characteristic that is a byproduct from some other functional adaptation. So from by this logic, we can say that the spandrels are incidental traits that appeared as a result of adaptation. Okay, now evolution is like a creative person that is lazy. Now this analogy was also present. It was present somewhat, in case if I remember, it was in para 3. Yeah, okay. Now if we could embody evolution as a person, then he or she would be creative but inherently lazy. So evolution is like a creative person that is lazy. So this is also mentioned, this is also mentioned. The show of plumage in the words. Now the show off is actually the meaning of the word ostentatious. Okay, of plumage of birds of paradise is for the purpose of camouflage. Was this for the purpose of camouflage? This is totally the incorrect. Okay, this is incorrect as per the passage. So that is the reason that it's the correct, because we are actually looking for the not true. Okay, now the main purpose was not. See, many species invest heavily in camouflage and other means of blending into the surroundings to avoid predators. So the physically heavy and downgrade ostentatious plumage of the birds, they seem like a clear invitation to be eaten, but crucially they help these birds to pass on their genes, okay, because it increases their chances of attracting a mate. Okay, so it is not for a purpose of camouflage, okay, but it is for the purpose of a passing on the genes. So author states that despite some species having traits that help them disappear into the surrounding, the birds of paradise actually want to be noticed by the potential mates. Okay, so that is the reason. So thus, although the feature feathers are used for survival, they are not used for camouflage. So okay, so the main purpose is not the purpose of camouflage, but it is actually the purpose of survival, so that they can actually pass on the genes. Okay, male pythons were known to have back limbs once upon a time. Now this was also present somewhere in this option. Yeah, so the male pythons have little claw-like. So the male pythons have little claw-like structures towards the tail, which although they ate courtship are all the remains of their hind limbs. So the sentence makes it clear that the claws behind male pythons originated from their once hind limbs. Okay, so the male pythons were known to have back limbs once upon a time. So all are correct, but this is factually incorrect. So this is actually your answer. An easy question. Okay, the passage supports the inference that. Okay, so basically we are looking for the inference of the passage. Okay, so the passage supports the inference that. Okay, now let's go to the options. Vestigial structures and spandrels provide sufficient ground to reject the idea of evolution. So do they provide the vestigial structures and the spandrels provide sufficient ground to reject the idea of evolution. Okay, see the last line. Although the chin throws a spandrel in the works, there is nearly always a reason or at least an explanation for the myriad traits we see across biology. Okay, so they're not saying that it provides a sufficient ground to reject the idea of evolution. It is implicitly saying, like, rather, that the vestigial structure and spandrels actually reinforce the idea of evolution. It does not reject the idea of evolution. It actually reinforces the idea of evolution. Okay, so it actually supports the idea of evolution. It does not actually rejects the idea of evolution. Okay, now the apparently useless features of evolution actually serve as evidence for the theory. Okay, now the apparently useless features of evolution actually serves as an evidence for the theory. Okay, now this will gonna stay in contention. Okay, we're gonna discuss this option, but let's eliminate the other options in case if this is the correct. Evolutionary biology provides innumerable examples of truly useless spandrels. Okay. Now, what is innumerable examples? Did the author mention about the innumerable example? He just gave one example of a chin for that matter. Okay. So evolutionary biology provides innumerable examples of truly useless spandrel. The second problem with this particular option is the useless spandrel. Okay. So what the author believes is that there is the author believes that let's say, okay, one genuine exception is something that defines a species as modern human beings. No other have that. But we are left with, and no one has come up with the whole convincing reason why, although the chin throws a spandrel in the works, okay, that is apparently it looks useless, it looks spandrel, okay, but there is always a reason for, or at least an explanation for the myriad traits we see across biology, okay. So first of all, for the problem with this option is the innumerable examples, because the author does not mention, and the second, the author does not consider the spandrels are useless. He believed that there is always kind of a function, okay. There is currently, okay, like chin is an example for the spandrel, okay. So it seems to be useless, but there is actually a purpose. It actually aids in digestion, okay. So there is actually a purpose. So he does not believe that the spandrels are useless, but he says that apparently, like in one go, by seeming at one go, it seems that they are useless, but there is actually a purpose behind it, okay. For example, I gave you the example of a webbing of a human hand. So the webbing, it seems, it sees this is useless, but there's a purpose. It actually separates the fingers from each other, which is more like functionable, I would say, okay. The idea that the evolutionary is a mindless, plan-free phenomenon is not sustainable on scrutiny. Now, this is factually incorrect, okay. Why this is factually incorrect? Because there's a line here, no? There are, okay, yeah, in reality, okay, so in reality, evolution is a mindless, plan-free phenomenon driven into endless possibilities by random mutations, the most successful of which win out, okay. So it is not sustainable. In reality, it is possible. So this is actually incorrect. So by option elimination, we are left with let's say the option number 2, but let's again go in detail and discuss this option. The apparently useless features of evolution actually serve as an evidence for the theory, okay. So the apparently, so the chin apparently, like in one go, it seems useless, okay, but it actually helps in the theory of evolution. Now the feathers, okay, the feathers of the birds, okay, they actually look useless, okay, but it actually strengthens the theory of evolution, okay. So that is the correct inference that you can draw from this passage, and that is the correct answer. Hope it is clear to you all. So next, let's move to the fourth question. Which of the following will true, if true, would nullify the central argument of the passage? I would gonna rate this question as the most difficult question, okay? I would say it is a difficult question. It is a moderate, medium difficulty level question, okay? So which of the following true would nullify the central argument of the passage? Now we know that we've discussed two questions based on the central argument of the passage. So the central argument of the passage is that the features that are useless, okay, so features that are useless, maybe they can be the vestigial, or they can be, let's say, spandrels, okay, but there is always a purpose, okay, they always serves a purpose in the evolutionary, they always have an evolutionary purpose, I would rather say they have an evolutionary purpose, okay. So this is the central argument, and which would nullify, I mean, like, which would gonna actually weaken this particular argument. Now the survival of the fittest is considered vital in the evolutionary process. Yeah, this is factually present in the passage. It's mentioned, okay, as important as the concept of the survival of the fittest is to evolution, there are many examples that seem to undermine to this fact, okay. So the survival of fittest is considered vital. So the sentence is based on inherent assumption that survival of the fittest is perceived as a concept that is important to the theory of the evolution, okay. That is important to the theory. So as important as the concept of survival of the fittest is to the evolution, so it is important. So it is directly mentioned, but it is not nullifying the central argument of the passage. I mean, like, that is kind of the author's opinion also. So it is not something which is weakening the author's argument, okay. Now the vestigial traits or spandrels are functioning only during fetal development and not later. Did the author talk about some kind of timings that these particular traits function during the fetal development, and then later on they actually remove? For example, one such examples could be not the fallopian tubes, I would say, no, that is cut umbilical cord, okay. So this umbilical cord, He's actually giving an example of the umbilical cord here. Okay, sorry for getting into that kind of a discussion. Okay, but the umbilical cord is in case if you see a baby which is born, okay, it is attached, then there is a tube, that kind of a thing that is being cut. Okay, and that is actually known as an umbilical cord. So it is a vestigial trait or spandrel are functioning only during fetal development, not later. But did the author mention about these kinds of a thing? Okay, para 2 states that the sexual selection in a birth becomes a means of perpetuating their genes, okay, means of passing the genes, okay. So yeah, crucial for the birds to pass on their genes, okay. But nowhere does the author mention about the timing, okay. So only timing, and this thing is not mentioned, so it is not, and it is not nullifying the central argument of the passage, okay, because nothing about the timing that the author's main argument is not related to the timing, that at what particular time in the human history or for the other species that these particular organs work, okay. Now, some structures that were once thought of a vestigial are now understood to be useful. Now, this is actually supporting the main idea, okay. So it supports the main idea that the vestigial traits are useful, okay. So they used to be considered as useless, are now understand to be useful. So it is supporting the main idea, okay. So again, we are left with option number 4. That's actually the correct answer. So evolution eliminates only those random mutations or features that are harmful, okay. So it is saying that only those features are eliminated which are actually harmless, okay. So he's saying that if a feature is not, let's say this option is saying, in case if I'm going to reword, if the feature is not harmless, it will stay. Can we say that this option is saying that if the feature is not harmless, it will stay? Okay, but did the author actually discuss like harmless or a harmful? Okay, he's saying that there is a line, okay. Let me just move the cursor here. Okay, if something is not being used, then why bother maintaining it? It's hard to say why they haven't disappeared altogether, but give it another million years and perhaps they will. Okay, so he's saying that if a feature is not useful, it will eliminate over a period of a time. Okay, so if the feature is not useful, it is a useless, it will eliminate over a time. It will take a million years for it to be eliminated, but at last it will be eliminated. And this is saying evolution eliminates only those random mutations or features that are harmful, okay. So it believes that there are some features which are harmless, okay, or if something is not harmless, it implies that evolution, so it saying that the features which are harmless will gonna stay, okay. But the author is saying the author main point is about the useless and the useful aspect, not related to the harmful or the harmless aspect, okay. So that is saying that these features which are harmless, it will gonna stay. This is totally in contradiction to the author's opinion. So author's opinion is not related to harmless or harmful. It is related to the features that are useful and useless. Okay. So it again, we can again draw one inference here that it implies that evolution may not eliminate, let's say, it is saying that the useless features which are harmless, can we say this? Can we infer that? That the useless features which are harmless will gonna stay. Can we infer this? Okay. So it is saying that the feature is not harmless. It will say whether the feature is useful or useless. So in case if the feature is, let's say, useless plus harmless, it will gonna stay. But what is the author saying? The author is saying that in case if the feature is useless, it will gonna gradually, it will eliminate over a period of a time. Okay, so this is in contrary to the author saying. Okay, so they say that this is in contrary, yeah, because the author is saying that some features which are useless, okay, that will gonna erase, and this is saying that the some features which are harmless, which may be useless, can stay. Okay, so this is in contradiction to the whole contradiction to the author's argument, and moreover 1, 2 and 3 are eliminated. Okay, so that is the case. Okay, now let's move to the fifth question. According to the passage, the difference between a vestigial structure and a spandrel is, okay. So again, I would gonna rate it as a moderate to an easy question. Okay, so the answer to this paragraph is found in the last two paragraph. I would say this two paragraph. Okay, And this also where it talks about the vestigial. Okay, so both are useless structures or traits in the evolutionary history of organisms. Okay, now this is telling about the similarity. Okay, whereas the question is actually asking you about the difference. Okay, so it is saying both are useless structure or traits in the evolutionary history of organisms. Okay, so this is telling us the similarity. So this is factually incorrect, that there is no difference. Okay, so both are useless structures. So this is not the case. We are actually looking for the difference. Now, the vestigial structure provided an evolutionary benefit at some point in the long evolutionary process, but spandrels were remnants from the extinct ancestral forms of the creature. Okay. Now, this is divided into two parts. One is the vestigial structure and another is the spandrel. The vestigial structure part is actually correct. Okay. So what vestigial structure is correct? Okay. So it provides us an evolutionary benefit at some point in the long evolutionary process. So for example, there is a line. So this is a feature that no longer whatever made it advantageous enough to evolve in the first place. So it provided an evolutionary benefit at some point in the long evolutionary process. Okay. So there is a line. Okay. When an there was one line. No, I read it. Yes, when the very this line only. When an anatomical structure appears frankly inept, it is probably this is a feature that no longer does whatever made it advantageous enough to evolve in the first place. So this part is clear, okay? But spandrels were remnants from their extinct ancestral forms of the creature. Now this is incorrect, okay? So what is this saying? That they are the remnants, okay? But we says that, and let's say there is a line here, okay? An evolutionary spandrel is a physical structure or a behavioral characteristic that is byproduct of some other functional adaptation, okay? It is not something which is extinct ancestral forms of the creature, okay? It is actually a byproduct, okay? So that is the reason that this particular option is incorrect, because the spandrel wala part is unclear, okay? Vestigial structures performed evolutionary functions while spandrels were only support system. This is absolutely correct, okay? Now why this is absolutely correct is that, see, vestigial structure is a structure that this is the feature that no longer does, okay? That no longer does the purpose or whatever made it advantageous enough to evolve at the first purpose, okay? So evolve in the first place, and let's say the fourth paragraph is saying that they are actually the byproduct. Okay, so we can say that the vestigial structures perform evolutionary functions. Okay, so they performed an evolutionary functions while spandrels were only support system, because they were actually the byproduct. Okay, now the fourth, evolution discards vestigial structures over longer period of times, but spandrels are not. Okay, so this is both vestigials and spandrels are discarded. Okay, so this is factually incorrect. Okay, so both are apparently useless, hence it cannot be inferred that which one other may be discarded. Okay, so the discard part is not being mentioned by the author. Okay, so the author nowhere says that the vestigial structures will be discarded but the spandrels will not. Okay, so the author says that they looks like a useless, but there is a evolutionary function behind them. Okay, hence it cannot be inferred that one may be discarded or the other may not be discarded. So this part is not clear. Okay, so this is actually the correct answer, that this is a feature that vestigial structures performed evolutionary functions, that initially it used to perform. When an anatomical structures appear frankly inept, it is probably a vestigial part. This is a feature that no longer whatever made it advantageous enough to evolve in the first place. Okay, if okay, so evolved at the first place. So it earlier, okay, it performed the evolutionary function, but now it is not performing. What spandrels were only the support system, so it is actually the byproduct, and that is actually the correct answer. Hope you're gonna get this answer correct. Okay, so by this we are done with the passage on RC. Let's move to the other questions. So the very first question is related to the para summary. Okay, so affirmative action began as, let's say, let me just get into the highlight. Okay, so the affirmative action began as a government remedy. Okay, so first idea is that the affirmative action is a government remedy to the effects of long-standing discrimination among minority groups and consists of policy, programs, and procedures that give preference to minorities and women. Okay, so it's kind of a reservation, okay, in job hiring, admission to institution, or awarding the government contracts, etc. Okay, the typical criteria for affirmative action are race, gender, ethnic origin, and age. Okay, so in case if I have to just summarize this particular thing, so I would say that the affirmative action is something which is a government remedy. This is the first point. It is a government remedy. Okay, and then it is actually given preference to minority women, minorities and women preferences. And where the preferences are given, the preferences are given for like job hiring, admission, education, awarding of government contracts. Okay, and then it mentions about the criteria. Okay, so let's go by the options to options. So the educational and employment opportunities of minority groups are largely improved by government policies that give them preferential treatment. Now, do you think that this particular sentence has actually changed the context of the particular paragraph passage? Okay. Now, it is saying that the educational and the employment opportunities of minority groups are largely improved. Is it largely improved is the main purpose? It is actually given to a preferential treatment. Okay. So it is given preference to. Okay, the main purpose of giving the educational and employment opportunities was not largely improved. Okay, so this largely improved is actually changing the meaning of the entire sentence, meaning of the entire paragraph. Okay, so that give them the preferential treatment. Okay, so this is not improved. Okay, but actually to give the preferential treatment, they are given a preference over these kind of a thing. Okay, so the main purpose was to long-standing discrimination against them. Okay, it was the main purpose was not to improve these opportunities. Okay, now affirmative action guarantees. Now what is this guarantees? It gives you 100% assurance. So affirmative action guarantees preferential treatments to minorities based on their race, disability, gender, and age. So first of all, it is a certain kind of, let's say, I would say a social remedy. Okay, I mean, it does not first of all mention the opportunities. Okay, so what kind of an opportunities you get? Okay, so it does not mention like you get an opportunities in the education as well as, let's say, the job hiring. Okay, secondly, it misses upon the women aspect. Okay, so okay, in case if I want to talk about the minorities, but the women part is missing. Okay, and it just mentions the criteria. And what is this affirmative guarantees? Okay, there is nothing which actually gives you the kind of the guarantees. Okay, so this is incorrect. Now the affirmative action is an active effort. Now it is an effort is a good word. Okay, to improve employment. Now improve is a good word. Okay, to improve employment or educational opportunities for minority groups and for women. Okay, now this is actually the correct answer. Okay, now the government policies for the preferential treatment to minorities can remedy the effect of long-standing discrimination in society. Okay, first of all, again it mentions the minorities, it misses upon the women aspect. Okay, can remedy the effect of long-standing discrimination in society. Now what kind of preferential treatment? Okay, it mentions that government policies for preferential treatment, but what kind of preferential treatment? Okay, for the employment or educational opportunities, it misses upon this concept. So that is the reason that the third is a better answer. Okay, see, I'm saying it is a better answer, I'm not saying it is a correct answer. We need to pick up a option which actually is the language is correct and covers most of the main ideas. Okay, so the affirmative action is an active effort to improve employment. So it mentions this, improve the employment, it mentions us. Okay, for minorities and women, it mentions this also. Okay, group for the women, and it is actually an effort to improve. Okay, so it is a government remedy, it actually is an active effort, okay, to improve. Okay, and improve is a better word rather than guarantees or improve, largely improved by the government policy. This makes the sentence logically incorrect. Okay, so that is the reason. Okay, so I hope it's clear. Okay, so let's move to the next question. Now, this is a sentence rearrangement. I would treat it as a difficult. So now, in case if you remember in the previous classes, I've given you the example options with it, but now this is in a theta format. Now, what is a theta format? There is a blank space given to you, and you need to actually type in the answer. Okay, so the only way to do this particular thing is to go by the mandatory pairs. Okay, so now let me just say, so this island. Okay, now this is actually a pronoun, and we have just done with our grammar class, and we know that the pronoun is actually followed by something which is a noun. Okay, so there needs to be some kind of a noun. Okay, so this island, so is island mentioned anywhere? Okay, so there is a small island in the vast of ignorance. So I'm pretty sure that 4 will come first and then the 2 will come first. Okay, because 4 and 2 makes it a mandatory pair. So despite the impression one gets from textbooks, our current knowledge of the universe represents a small island in the vast ocean of ignorance. The scientific enterprise is all about expanding the landmass of this island. Now, what is this island? That is the small island that is being referred in the fourth sentence. So one pair we are sure is a 4-2. Okay. Now, can we see the another options 1 and 3? Now, it is fun to engage in the activity of gaining knowledge. Knowing everything in advance would have been much more boring. Okay, still it would be shocking. Okay, now the still, now what is still? Okay, it would be shocking to learn all at once. Okay, so we can say that the still in the first and the ideas how it is presented in the first and 3 make the first and the 3 a mandatory pair. Okay, so yeah, is it clear? Like, did you getting the contrast in the sentence 3 that begins with C actually contrast? So it is fun to engage in the activity of gaining knowledge. Knowing everything in advance would have been much boring. Still, it would be shocking to learn all at once of the discoveries of an alien civilization that had been doing. Okay, so it would be shocking to learn all at once. Okay, so that is the case. So 1 and 3 is a mandatory pair because still actually reinforce the idea which is being presented in the 1. Now, the main case is that in case if you're going to see 1, 3 and 4, 2, and in case we're going to read 4, 2 and 1, 3, then also both the sentences are making a logical sense. So how to break the deadlock? Now, this was actually the tricky part here. Okay. So now in case if you're going to see the words like knowing everything in advance, and then despite the knowledge of one gets from textbook, our current knowledge of the universe, okay, represents a small island. So we can say that a knowledge of the universe is actually a superset. Okay, and then we can say something related to shocking to learn all at once the discoveries of an alien civilization. Okay, so what will come first? The universe will come first, and then we could say that an alien civilization. Okay, that yeah, okay, so I mean, like, you agree with it? Okay, that that makes sense that the universe is something which is wider concept, and alien can be a part of that particular universe. Okay, so by that logic we can say that the 4, 2 and 1, 3 makes a logical sense. Okay, so again, there was one more click here. Okay, so let's say the activity of gaining knowledge in 1. Okay, it is an explanation of the scientific enterprise. See, the scientific enterprise is all about expanding the landmass of this island. It is fun to engage in the activity of gaining knowledge. Okay, so it is actually the gaining knowledge is an explanation of the scientific enterprise also. So by that logic also you can make sense that 4, 2 and 1, 3 is the correct sequence of it. Okay, so I would rate this as a difficult question. Maybe in a time pressure it would somewhat become difficult to do this, and only way to do this was with the help of the keywords. Okay, okay, so the last one is an odd one out, so let's get into the mode of it. So with climate change, coffee is going to be one of those genera that are going to be highly impacted because of its limited suitability for wider eco regions. Then coffee species, then coffee, we are invested in preserving the wild. Many are tropical crop species, or also wherever the coffee, each species has a very specific climate requirement and highly specified storage. Okay, so again at one go, in case if I read, I find that the 1, 2 and the 4, they all talks about the coffee. Okay, but then we need to break the deadlock between the option number 3 and the 5. Okay, so let's read the sentences. So I can say that sentence 2 actually introduces the topic. It actually introduces you to the theme. Okay, that coffee species are notoriously difficult to conserve for a variety of reasons. Okay, so it introduces you to the theme of the paragraph, that it is difficult to conserve for a variety of reasons. Okay, now with climate change, coffee is going to be one of those genera that are going to be highly impacted because of its limited suitability for wider ecoregions. Now the option statement number 1 is actually giving you one reason. Okay, it is actually giving you one reason that why it is difficult to conserve a coffee. Okay, now let's see 4. So also, whereas the coffee genus is represented around the globe, each wild species has a very small natural distribution. So it again is giving you the another reason. Okay, so we know anyhow that 1, 2, 4 are related. Okay, so they are talking about the coffee species and its conservation and the reasons for it. Okay, now each species has a specific climate requirement and is highly specialized to tolerate a narrow range of habitat conditions. Now, this is actually talking, each species is actually talking about the coffee species. Okay, so it is a species, and then again, it is giving us the one of the reason, okay, one reason, okay, that why conservation of coffee is notoriously difficult, okay, because it is highly specialized to tolerate a narrow range of a habitat conditions. Okay, but in case if we're going to see at the option statement number 3, we definitely need to develop crypto-preservation capabilities. The rest of the other things are talking about the conservation of the coffee and why conservation of coffee is notoriously difficult, and they're actually giving you the reasons. Okay, the third is talking about the preservation capabilities. Okay, if we are interested in preserving the wild relative of many of our tropical crop species. So now this is not talking, this is a very general. Now this is a general, whereas the entire passage is actually talking about the specific about the coffee species, and this particular statement is too general. Okay, so it has moved away from coffee conservation to preservation, and that too of a tropical crop, so too general, and that is the reason that the third is actually the correct answer. Okay, so by this we are done with our quiz of our whole section. Hope it is clear. In case of any doubts, we can get back in touch on the WhatsApp group. Meanwhile, just stay safe and practice. Okay, practice, that is the key. Okay, so thank you, class. Hope to see you next.